What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the first anniversary episode of Political Frenemies. I'm Chris Newton. I'm an academic and a former Tory defence policy advisor, and with me, as always, my co-host, Mathew Hulbert, Lib Dem activist and former councillor. Hello, Mathew. We're a year old now. Not us individually, but obviously, but out the show's on the the show's coming up till the 3rd of November. Actually, is when we put out the pilot episode. But we're coming up to 1 year. Who would have thought we would have made it this far?
Well, quite. And first of all, can I say, Chris, that I had a big smile on my face when you did your introductions, because I love how you try to be down with the kids. It cracks me up. But yeah, so it's just me and you this week, because we thought, didn't we, that we'd go back to, for this week only, folks, we've got some amazing guests for you lined up over the next few weeks, but we thought we'd go back to how we started Political Frenemies, which is just me and Chris talking about the week's politics and hopefully disagreeing agreeably. But if you can remember back, Chris, so basically, remind our audience what was the whole point of us starting this podcast. It was basically to take our offline chats online, right?
Yeah, although I seem to remember, I think you were sort of pestering me for quite a while, actually, for quite a few months and years beforehand about doing something, and I was but back then I didn't really do political commentary. I did it on Twitter, but I didn't really do it on TV and things. So I was probably busy and things. But we've been meetings. It was when you've been doing talk, coming down to the studio and to LBC as well. We've been meeting and we sort of decided to do a podcast or to do something. We originally did a space as a kind of experiment, an X space. Do you remember during the middle of the riots?
I do indeed remember. It went quite well.
Yeah, and then sort of that went well enough for us to conclude that we could do something on a regular basis. Took us a while because these things take a while to set up, and we eventually started in November, and and we've been going. Obviously, we've had to have a break early this year through obviously no fault of our own, and obviously we had a break over the summer as well. But apart from that, we've been going strongly for every week doing the week's news, commenting on the week's news, and for some reason I've been able to put up with all of your nonsense, basically. So that's really good.
And quite how I put up with you, Chris, I don't know, but I have. No, but seriously, quite often people will ask me, Lib Dem friends of mine will ask me that, I really like your podcast, Mathew, but that Chris, he's very right wing, they say. And they say, how on earth did you become friends? How on earth did we become friends? How did that happen?
I think we just argued all the time on Twitter, didn't we? That was that was how it started, and then for some reason we sort of talked about each other's sort of experiences in the media and so forth, and I just think, yes, we disagree, but all of us who are sort of political nerds, we share something. We share this fascination for politics and for arguing ideas and so forth. So even though we do disagree, even though we do have differences and so forth, we're in the same boat in the sense that we have this fascination, and that's why I think it's really good that people from opposite sides can both debate but also be friends as well.
Absolutely, and we thought, didn't we, Chris, that there was something quite unique. Actually, there's lots of political podcasts. There's political podcasts coming out the whole time, left, right, and centre, literally. And it's a very crowded market. But there's not all that many that have a Conservative and a Liberal Democrat, right? So we're fairly unique, I think.
Yeah, we're very unique in terms of that, but I think another thing that brings us to the table is that we're both from working class backgrounds, but we've had experience of politics at some level, not the highest of levels, but at some level. Matthew's been a councillor in the past. I've served as shadow cabinet. Now, I wasn't obviously a shadow cabinet minister. The Tories would be in a damn sight better place if I was.
Quite right.
But I was an advisor to the shadow cabinet in terms of defence policy. So again that gives you another kind of insight. Well, how does the advisor sort of view things? It's often very different to the person who's out there front of shop, being the MP, being the shadow minister, and so forth. So I think we are very unique in a lot of senses, and I don't know if you've noticed, I've changed some of the sort of branding and some of the advertising around us, but I think we can be anti-establishment. We are certainly anti the establishment podcasts, and as I said to you on the previous episodes, we want to be the ECW of political podcasting. We can't be the establishment, but we can be like the underground sort of cult thing that people obsess over, and I think that's something that we can be.
Well, we can, but Chris, don't forget, I said to you when you said that ECW went bust. We need to be like the AEW or something. We need to be another insurgent thing against in their case, the WWE, the huge WWE. Yeah, so we are, another big thing for me and you, Chris, and for the guests that we invite on, is that we need to be independent, right? So we may be of political parties. You've been of the Conservatives. I'm a Liberal Democrat. We have people on from Labour and the Greens, etc. And yes, at times you want to champion your party's cause, but equally we're independent of viewpoint, right? So if we think there's a reason that our parties aren't doing, we may be wrong. You don't have to agree with us, but if we feel that our parties are not doing what we think they should, or that they've said something wrong, or whatever, we come on and we say so. And in a sense, a podcast like this can only be that way, right?
Yeah, yeah. It would be very sort of strange if all we did was parrot the party lines. So ever since I stopped working for the Tories, I've always had my own independent sort of views and stated my independent views in public. That's important. I think it's very important to not be a slave to the party machinery and to speak your mind. And we're not carbon cutouts of our respective party leaders. We have our own opinions and our thoughts, and it's very important, I think, for everybody to voice their to assert their independence and to voice what they really think about things. And again, that's another thing that I think really makes us what we are is the fact that we are honest. And you've been very honest in recent weeks about Ed Davey, which I've been enjoying.
But just on that, I don't think you're perhaps still necessarily at the moment kind of as involved party politically as I still am in the Lib Dems. But at times it's been, including quite recently, actually, it becomes really quite difficult for me at times actually to be as vocal as I have been. Some people don't like that. Have you had anything like that, or hasn't it affected you in that
Like I say, I've because I'm an academic as well.
way?
I do sort of value. I do think it's important for academics to take a step back and to oversee things as opposed to being sort of up in at the front line in the trenches kind of thing. So I do maintain sort of a degree of independence, especially as well now that the right is split. and that's very difficult for me because I have sympathies for a lot of what the Tories are doing, but also for what a lot of Reform is doing as well. But especially when I was criticising Kemi Badenoch, which I think certainly early in the year she wasn't nailing Starmer down in the way in which an opposition leader should be, in my opinion. I had a lot of criticism from sort of pro-Tory accounts about my criticisms, but I think I've been vindicated. I think in recent weeks, Badenoch has been a lot more sharper, much more aggressive. Follows up questions much better than she used to do. So what I say is that yeah, I'm right as always. But
And we've had, and Chris, we've had, we're not suggesting for a moment that it's because these people have necessarily have watched or listened to our podcast, although you never know. But we've said things where, suggested things for both of our respective leaders where they have then gone on to do those things, which I guess is quite gratifying for us. So, you said what Kemi Badenoch should be doing at PMQs, and to be fair to her, she has started doing some of those things. I've said, in fact, me and you have said that Ed Davey should start doing some kind of set piece policy kind of speeches and things, and he has started doing that. So, I'm not suggesting for a moment necessarily that it's us having that influence, but someone is saying the same things that we're saying.
yeah, I like to think that everybody's in Westminster is listening to this podcast, but again, we have to be realistic. But that's the point of being sort of independent, and say, and being willing to criticise your own side. Because if you don't offer constructive criticism, then they don't improve. You don't improve. So I hope that within the chaos, within the madness of this podcast, we do offer one or two constructive things, which people in Westminster, whether you're listening as an MP or an advisor or as a parliamentary researcher, hopefully we offer some value to you, even if there's our podcast is mostly characterised by sort of madness and chaos.
and Chris, take us back. Why did we decide to start having guests on? It was just us for a very long time, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. It was just us for a long time, and yeah, I think again, having guests adds a different sort of dimension to the podcast. You're friends with Ian Dale and Peter Cardwell, so that's who we started off with, and I think each guest has brought something different and something unique. With their own contributions, so and I think it's made the podcast more interesting and more unpredictable as well, because we have had unpredictable guests. We've got unpredictable guests sort of lined up as well, but it's also fascinating to hear the opinions of not only the more established people, but also I would call the up and coming people, the rising stars, and hopefully we can nurture some talent as well.
And I want to thank our guests individually in just a second, very quickly. But again, let's be, I like to think that we're also, really honest with our viewers and listeners. This is a crowded market, isn't it? And building an audience is tough, and we found it tough, right?
Yeah, it is. It is tough. Starting on YouTube, starting on podcasting, most people find it tough. It's it is difficult to because it takes relentless marketing, relentless effort, because because you can't be on social media all the time, but it has been tough. But I'm glad that we've stuck at it. I'm glad that we've established a body of work, a body of episodes, And I scroll down the list on YouTube now. There's a lot of episodes now. We're on our 33rd episode, and it's great just just to see the thumbnails and the fact that we documented some very important events in over the past year, and we've documented very dramatic, extremely dramatic change in politics as well. And we'll talk more about that a bit later with the polls. So so yeah, I mean, I'm sure you would agree with me. It has been tough, but I think it's been worth it.
And I meant to mention this last week, and I didn't, but actually it fits more into this week with us reviewing the year. But we recently had our best ever set of results for a YouTube full video, right?
Yeah, yeah. That was a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I mean the general trend is that we our numbers are going up, our subscribers are going up, and yes, it takes time. It takes time. It's a crowded market, so being found by people is a challenge, but it's good to see more and more people are watching and listening, and are watching and listening for longer as well, as last week's episode illustrated. The watch time sort of went up sort of last week. So and we are also gradually improving. So with every week, with every episode, you'll see that, especially this season, we've really have changed things. We've changed our look, we've changed our graphics, our presentation, and again, there's no team here. We are the team, right? There's no series of producers behind the scene. We do all of this ourselves, and for me especially, this has been a learning experience. I'm learning on the job how to do editing and how to do this thing. So, but I'm glad sort of those of you who were with us at the start with our first episode, with perhaps the quality and the graphics not being quite quite what they are today. But I'm glad that you've been able to see how we've evolved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do just want to thank our guests. And me and Chris were racking our brains to ensure that we didn't leave anyone out, because that would not be good. So I just want to give a special thanks to Chris Carter, who was, well, he was going to be our regular Labour contributor. He sadly, in the end, only did one episode, because he's now, talk about a rising star, he's now standing for the Senedd for
Yeah.
Labour. So we'll see what happens with Chris. But he was great on the one episode that he did for us. Peter Cardwell, the aforementioned of Talk TV, and of course an author who's now been on twice, so we love Peter. My friend Ian Dale of LBC, and hopefully you can see his book that I contributed to over my shoulder. Don't forget to purchase that on by-elections, so thanks to Ian. Kevin Foster, former government minister and MP, that was a really big moment for us to have Kevin on. The fantastic Matthew Goodwin Freeman, he really is box office, and our figures always go up when he's on. He's just fantastic, and we'll have him on again soon. The also brilliant Daniel Laycock, our regular Green contributor, bringing a very different perspective to the pod. So he's fantastic. Karen Lindsay, up to now our only female contributor. We are trying our best to try and change that. We realise it's not good enough, and so we are doing all that we can about that. But thanks so much to Karen; she was fab. And both of our good friends, Andy Chandler, who was really brilliant as well. So we've been really lucky, Chris, haven't we?
Yeah, and as I say, a real mix there, mix in terms of views, but a mix in terms of, as I said, established talents and also rising stars, and and it'd be really good to have those people back on as well to because we have enjoyed we have enjoyed having everybody on so far, and yeah, and as well as some additions as well. We've got new people lined up as well. So so stay tuned, and over the next few weeks, we will continue after this episode having sort of guests on regularly. As Matthew said, this is only an exception this week, due to the fact that this is the anniversary edition. But in terms of
All right, yeah.
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to run through what we're doing
Oh,
today, but
can I just say one thing then, which is because I like butting in, you know. I just want to say, and you know, I know this has been obviously fairly light-hearted, but I was reflecting a little bit earlier on today that you talked about the break earlier on in the year, and you know, when I think back to a year ago, I was still kind of, even though it was a couple of years on, I was still kind of very much in the midst of grieving my late mum. Then, you know, in March this year, I'm not overstating it. This is what I was told that you know I was very near to death myself when I was undiagnosed type 2 diabetic and had a hypo. And you know, thankfully, people came. I won't go into the detail, but people came from my work and called an ambulance, and you know, obviously I was all right. I'm here and much healthier now. But you know, I guess it's one of those things, Chris, that a lot can happen to you personally in a year, right?
yeah, and yeah, as like I say, I mean, you know, it's I mean that was, you know, that was a serious moment, and you know, thank God that that you came through that, and I've you know, during that time I had bad news as well with my nan passing away, so so a lot can happen. Life is unpredictable, which is why on, you know, on this podcast, yes, we talk about serious views, serious issues. We exchange our views and we argue robustly, but also we hope to have some fun as well, because like I say, life is unpredictable, and you know, it can't be serious all the time. So hopefully we are informative. Hopefully we are you know, we give people, you know, robust debates, but also people enjoy listening to us, and enjoy the more light-hearted moments as well. So and we will continue to endeavour to provide that that mix.
We absolutely will, and I guess you know on behalf of me and you, Chris, we just really want to thank people that take the time out of their week to watch or to listen, because we appreciate that it is an extremely crowded market. You've got a lot to choose from, and the fact that so many of you in increasing numbers are tuning in, whether it's to the full length editions, whether it's just to the shorts, whether it's a mixture of both or whatever. We really, really appreciate it. We do think of ourselves as a little community, and yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. So what we're going to be doing today? We are going to look at, firstly, we're just going to quickly revisit something that we did last week, which, because there's been sort of dramatic developments. We're talking about the former Prince Andrew being stripped of all of his titles. Then we'll talk about Rachel Reeves's rent fiasco sort of problems, row, sort of calls for resignation, and so forth. Then we'll look at this new poll which places the Greens in second place. So that'll be interesting. And then Mathew wants to say something like he normally does about the Lib Dems as well, and especially this trans quota row. So I'm sure we'll squeeze some time in for the Lib Dems as well, because apparently we must. So that's what we're going to do. So let's do this, shall we? So our first item is, as I said, something that we talked about last week. So we're not going to spend too much on this item, because I think a lot of you did enjoy that debate last week about the royal family, but there has been a dramatic development in that story. Prince Andrew, or I should say Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has been stripped of all of his titles, including Prince and his dukedom, and he's also been evicted from Royal Lodge as well. And the King announced this earlier. I think it was yesterday. It was a recording on the Friday. So dramatic development. This is, a prince effectively, losing everything, losing his title, no longer a prince. Sort of reaction to this story in the light of what we said sort of last week about the future of the royal family and whether this will affect people's views or the monarchy, or is the fact that the king has seemed to take a decisive stance on this. Will that kind of avert any kind of public backlash towards? It's important to state again that the just allegations against Andrew. He hasn't been convicted of anything. So again, we're in this awkward situation where he's lost his titles for some reason, but we can't really say what, or we don't know officially what. But in terms of the king's reaction to this and the potential political reaction, potential future political sort of action on this. Has he sort of taken the sting out of this story now, and will things sort of simmer in relation to this story, or are there more developments yet to come, Mathew?
Oh. Yeah, thanks. So a couple of things on this, Chris. First of all, in my view, he's lost all of these titles and his home, etc., because he's brought controversy to the door of the royal family, and they don't like that. I want to quash this rumour that the king has acted quickly. He hasn't. This controversy has been at Andrew's door for a very, very long time, and the royal family, including, I have to say, the late Queen, have failed to act. I think they've been dragged kicking and screaming to make the changes that they have this week. Now, I welcome them, in so much as they were clearly the right thing to do. But I think it's royal spin that the king and Prince William have acted speedily on this. I really don't think that they have. But I think a number of questions still remain. So I think I'm right in saying that Andrew, I don't know if this is still the case, this is why I'm asking, but I think I'm right in saying that he's been, as a result of his titles, etc., a member of the House of Lords. Now, I don't think he ever physically appears in the Lords, but I think I'm right in saying that he's been a member of the House of Lords. Is he still a member of the House of Lords? Is that within the King's gift to take away? If he is still, even just in theory, a member of the House of Lords, then surely it's for Parliament now to act on that, and that presents its own difficulty, Chris, because actually, I'm sure I'm right in saying that it's within the rules of Parliament that, and I think this is disgraceful, but it's within the rules of Parliament that parliamentarians can't raise the royal family in any kind of way that might, be deemed to be controversial. I'm reminded of the great and late Tony Benn's famous phrase where he said, who are the powerful, who gave them that power, how do we get rid of them? MPs and peers should be able to raise matters of the MPs especially, because I have to say, Lords shouldn't really be there. They're as equally as unelected as the royal family. But MPs certainly should be able to raise questions about the monarchy and not be shut down by the Speaker. And it's going to be very interesting if some of these matters are raised, Chris. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, deals with those. But yeah, so in terms of Royal Lodge, yeah, okay, he's being asked to give up this 30-room mansion, and again, I say quite right. And I know well, I don't know if I can call this spin because some people might say it's factually correct, but I gather he's now going to live somewhere on the grounds of Sandringham, which apparently are privately owned by Charles. Okay, fair enough. But what about security? Who's going to be paying for that? Is Charles going to be paying for everything now? And even if Charles is paying, even if the king is paying for everything, is that all going to come from Charles's private wealth? I think we need to. I think taxpayers, and you're someone, Chris, who says that taxes need to be spent wisely. I want to be insured as a taxpayer. that not not a pound, not a penny is going towards anything to do with Andrew. And this, of course, this is a very serious matter. But as always with these occasions, there are memes that are going round, and I did have a slight smile earlier today when I saw someone saying that Andrew is the artist formerly known as Prince. So that did raise a slight smile to me. But I appreciate these are very serious, clearly very serious, issues. And so I think, Chris, there are a number of questions that still remain unanswered. I'm a bit less bothered personally about whether he's going to be invited to Christmas, etc. at the main part of Sandringham. I mean, ultimately, he'll always be the king's brother. He can't not be. There's no way of getting rid of that title. He literally is that as a family member. I'm less bothered about things like that, but I'm more concerned about these questions that are still unanswered. I mean, as far as you know, is he still a member of the Lords?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest, but I think you raise questions that a lot of people will raise, and you make a good point with regards to the use of taxpayers' money and so forth. And as I said, there is clearly a reason why the king is making this dramatic move, and you can't really mount a defence that Andrew should be still afforded sort of favourable treatment or to retain certain things. It's that's a very difficult sort of argument to make. So I'd say you're right in the sense that yes, these questions need to be resolved, and we'll have to see how Parliament and how the king addresses them. But do you think in terms of the overall standing of the royal family in terms of the public, will this dramatically affect it, or will people say, well, Andrew's Andrew and the good members of the royal family, Charles, Camilla, William, Kate, etc., Anne, etc., these we shouldn't let one person who's alleged, who's facing very serious sorts of allegations should be able to cloud the rest of the family that do good work for the nation, whether you believe they deserve to be in their positions or not.
Well, I mean, I clearly don't, and I've been a proud out-and-out Republican for a very long time, and indeed was on the board of Republic, the official campaign for an elected head of state. And for me, it does just come down to democracy. I mean, again, I refer back to Tony then. I think we need to know who the powerful are, who put them in that position, and how do we get rid of them. And we literally can't get rid of the monarchy. And I look across the sea to the Republic of Ireland, who have just once again had a very successful presidential election, had a battle of ideas in that presidential election, and now have their head of state for the next 7 years. And I see no reason why we couldn't do that. And I know last week you were trotting out the age-old thing of, oh, what about President Blair? Oh, what about President Angela Rayner? My answer to both of those things is, if they were popularly elected, yes, that's right. And then if they didn't do a good job, they wouldn't be returned, would they? I mean, that is democracy. We don't say, we've got this awful government, so let's not ever elect a government again. I mean, that would be a ridiculous idea.
What would they actually do? If we kept the same separations of the head of state and the head of government as they do, they're not actually doing something that's meaningful in terms of government policy. They do something meaningful in terms of projecting an image to the nation and doing all the ceremonial stuff and going on state visits and diplomatic aspect. But I think for me it's a very hard argument to make. Why go to the whole effort of elections when they're not actually affecting government policy on the day.
Because democracy matters. And what I'd actually say to you is that the retiring president of Ireland, the very popular Michael D. Higgins, formerly of the Irish Labour Party, has broken with tradition and made quite, not attacks on government because it's not within his realm to do so, but kind of broad brush kind of policy speeches on very particular and very rare occasions where he has spoken for the majority of people in Ireland. And because he's the elected president, he can, on occasion, do that. Charles can't do that because he's constitutionally forbidden from
I don't
doing.
even agree. If you think about the Queen, for example, when she gives her speech, or when she spoke during the pandemic, people afforded her kind of respect because she's seen as apolitical, because she's seen as not sort of favouring one political party or another. She's seen as this kind of person who's above party politics. She's given that kind of respect that the Prime Minister didn't. And I know you say, well, the Prime Minister at the time was Boris, and nobody respects him and so forth. But to have that apolitical figure who's above all of that, who can speak for everybody and not just one political party, that's not a thing to be sniffed at, is it? Really?
It isn't in the way that you put it, but the Queen. I mean, I know this was my mum's view, and obviously the Queen was still alive when my mum passed away. But I knew my mum. It was of her view that whenever the Queen did sadly pass, that should probably, in her view, be the end of the monarchy. Of course, that's not how the monarchy works. The next generation, just line in succession, takes over without a buy or leave or a worry about what the people of the country think about that. But Charles is a very different kettle of fish, Chris. However he acts as king, we do know his views. We know his views on almost everything, right? We know his views. We know what he thinks. Because he wasn't shy about telling us all. Now, on some of the things, I agree with him. It's actually not about whether you agree or disagree with him. It's about the fact that, as Prince of Wales, he told us his view on almost every single issue. And he wrote those spider letters, as they were known to, that were produced with great controversy reported on by the Guardian at the time, where he wrote to government ministers demanding this, that, and the other, when really he had no right to do so. I mean, he can write to his local MP just like everyone else, but he was far superior to that, and wrote to government ministers expecting to get what he wanted to do done. And as I said to you last week, and you can check with Republic, this is absolutely the case on matters that directly affect the royal family. The king still has a veto, and I put it to you, Chris, that in a democracy that should not be the case. It's a disgrace. And actually, every time there's not just even particularly a royal controversy, although I'm absolutely sure that more people will be signing up to Republic as a result of this latest drama, but even when there's a positive, in quotes, royal thing like a birth or a wedding, and it gets wall-to-wall coverage, and not a word of criticism is ever aired by the traditional media, polls show that support for a republic goes up. And so, am I saying that it's anywhere near a majority at the moment? No, I don't think that it is. But one of the things that really annoys me about, I see these royal correspondents, and number one, I think, what qualification do you need to become a royal correspondent or a royal commentator? Jenny Bond, I mean, give me a break, honestly. But I think it's to do with access, right? They know that they're not going to get access if they're overly critical. And so they might as well not be correspondents or commentators. They might as well be royal PR pods who just come on the telly and give us the royal line. It seems to me that some journalists, I'd say allegedly, I best say, kind of lose their critical faculties when it comes to reporting on or commenting on the royal family, and I just really don't think that is good enough. These are people that take the public dime, take a lot of the public dime, and they should be reported on absolutely straight down the line as politicians are reported on. So I have a problem with the royal family per se. Look, do I think that the King and Prince William, the Prince of Wales, have finally done what they needed to do? Yeah, I do. Do I think it will take the sting out of the absolute worst criticism for a while? Yes, it probably will. But until these other questions that I listed earlier on are answered, this story is not going to go away. And again, I hope that our elected politicians are allowed by the Speaker to raise some of these issues in Parliament. It would be a democratic disgrace, Chris, if they're not allowed to do so.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. Actually, you mentioned royal commentators. Actually, there was someone who used to work from GB News who once said that news channels are absolutely sort of desperate for royal commentators. It's like there's not enough of them, especially for the airtime. So you never know, Matthew. There might be. I know. You want you want more media appearances. There might be another career in that, Matthew. So how do you fancy that?
I'm not that desperate. Well, I mean, funny enough, I do, I've unsurprisingly perhaps had no request, but I did put out some feelers earlier today and said, look, if you want the Republican point of view this weekend, I'm absolutely free. So we'll see what happens. But genuinely, Chris, I mean, if we're going to be fair, there should be some more Republican voices. Graham Smith, head of Republic, is often on. I saw and heard him yesterday, but he can't be everywhere all the time. And my personal view is,
maybe there just aren't that many people around.
Well, but
in that case.
But there are a lot of people who support Republic. Whether they want to go on TV and radio is a different matter. But look, I'd certainly be prepared to go on and argue the Republican cause for media outlets, so people know where to find me.
Okay.
Now, can I just raise one other thing? Because speaking of Republic, I heard Graham Smith saying on various media outlets this week that Republic, the official campaign for an elected head of state, have instructed lawyers to look into whether there's enough of a case to bring a private prosecution against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. So again, this matter might be far from over, Chris.
Yeah, I think I heard something to the effect of that. So, I mean, again, it's something that people are entitled to do if the courts say that the case is strong enough to get to court. But again, there's allegations, but at this stage, Andrew has not been convicted of anything, and he denies the allegations. So again, it's a very awkward conversation where he's had his titles removed for something, but we can't. We can't say what it is, or we don't know what it is exactly.
And Chris, sorry, just one further point. One thing that I did think that was interested in the statement that was put out by the King and Prince William, and look, people I'm sure will be aware that this isn't just them two deciding what to put out. They have advice. Of course, they have advisors. They have press teams. These things will have been absolutely pored over before they're put out. And again, we always have to keep repeating the Andrew, the former prince, former Duke of York, absolutely denies the allegations against him. But I did think it was interesting that they made specific reference to, and quite rightly, to all victims of sexual abuse. They clearly recognise that this is a very serious issue, of which, and we're not necessarily talking about Andrew here, obviously, but which there are, people, has to be said, mostly women who are absolute victims of sexual abuse. Jeffrey Epstein absolutely has victims, and there are victims of other people. And I thought it was interesting that they clearly felt the need to specifically say these people are always at the forefront of our minds. That's quite a statement, really.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's an important observation to make, and but as I've stated, in terms of the specific allegations, they have not been heard or proven in court. So it's also important to state that as well. But it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that the monarchy is undemocratic. But it still has to respond to public opinion in today's society in a democracy. So there are mechanisms of accountability, even though they're not kind of the official sort of democratic ones. But but we'll see how the story develops in future weeks. Let's move on to Rachel Reeves, shall we? And Labour's had pretty sort of, well, as always, really a pretty tricky week with various things going on, but. But the story that has emerged as kind of dominating the news headlines over the past couple of days is the fact that you have Rachel Reeves facing allegations of breaking the rules by renting out her family home in Suffolk without the required landlord license. Reeves said that her agent assured her husband that the agent would apply for the license, but they failed to do so. However, she originally told the Prime Minister and the independent advisor on standards that she wasn't aware of the need for a license, and didn't send him the important emails which shows the correspondence between her husband and the agent. So this is a very tricky matter for Rachel Reeves. Some people are calling for a resignation. Some people are saying that this is a minor transgression, sort of minor mistake, and therefore that should be the end of the matter. That's certainly how the Prime Minister views things, even though he wasn't happy with her initial account, what she initially sent him. Where do you stand on this?
Well, look, I think she should go because she's been a pretty lousy chancellor to this point. But of course, the difficulty with that is that she's totally in lockstep with Starmer, and really, if she goes, he'd have to go, and of course, that's very unlikely to happen. But I think she should go for her economic mismanagement rather than for this. So a couple of things to say on this. And so, I mean, from what I gather, listening to various podcasts and things about this week and today, so I gather that this is a very particular thing to Southwark Council, that they require this £90-odd license to do what Rachel Reeves wanted to do. I don't think it's the case in many other councils across the country. So I happen to actually know the opposition leader on Southwark Council, which is the Lib Dem opposition, main opposition, and I know that my friend Victor Chamberlain, Councillor Victor Chamberlain, who leads the Lib Dem opposition on Southwark Council, this week has been raising, not so much particularly having to go at Rachel Reeves, but saying, why on earth has Southwark Council got this daft thing that people have to apply for? So I think there's questions for Labour run. I mean, not ironic that it's a Labour run council that has kind of allegedly had some involvement in getting Rachel Reeves into this difficulty, or at least having the parameters which she had to try and hoops that she had to try and jump through when renting out her family home when she moved into 11 Downing Street. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure Victor will be raising it in the council chamber, and it'll be interesting to see what the people from the Labour Council have to say about that. So there's that. But I also think, and I was really interested today to hear someone on the, a conservative type person on the Spectator podcast say this. I wouldn't have expected to. I would have expected them to go full throttle on the attack on Rachel Reeves. But he said, look, let's give ministers a little bit of a break. Especially Rachel Reeves. We know what she's got on her plate. having to try and sort out the mess that is the economy, even if some of it is her and Starmer's fault, or even a lot of it. Um, you know, she trusted the estate agents to sort this out. Yes, she's ultimately responsible. Yeah, of course she is. But you trust professionals to do what they need to do and to know the rules in a specific area. And I gather that they have taken the blame for that. But I think too, I put a tweet out. I can't remember whether it was yesterday now or earlier today, where I said, and this goes for all politicians, right? I'm not just saying this about progressive in quotes people. I think this for all politicians that we expect them now in today's media age, and especially the social media age, to be perfect, right? To be actually perfect, to never make a mistake, to never make an admin error, to never do anything. And that is just not reality. These are human beings, they're fallen human beings. People make mistakes just like me and you do, and everyone watching and listening.
I don't.
Yeah, go on.
I don't.
Well, vomit inducing. Oh dear. Yeah. Well, apart from Lord Saint Doctor Chris, but yeah, people do make mistakes, and we all make mistakes in our admin from time to time, and that you think, oh, what a wally I've been, I wasn't aware of that, or whatever it was. Now, I think it's also true to say that if this would have been absolutely explosive a month out from a budget. But I guess if Starmer had really wanted rid of Reeves, he could have absolutely said to the letter of the law, you have broken, you should have abided by this. You've not done that. There's no excuse. You're going. He could have done that had he wanted to. He obviously doesn't want to do that because he realises that. I heard an interesting thing, separate but aligned to this, Chris. I heard an interesting thing this week where they said that actually, one of the reasons why Starmer keeps Rachel Reeves in office is because the bond markets want her kept in office, and that actually, despite the fact that she's the elected representative, she's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, it's actually really the bond markets that are controlling much of what economic policy there is, and that really she's at their mercy if they decide to turn on her. Who knows whether they will after this budget? But if they decide to turn on her. And in a sense, it's not really the Prime Minister's confidence that she particularly needs. It's bond market confidence. And if they cease to have that confidence, then I think she'll be out on her ear straight away, rather like Kwasi Kwarteng was in 2022. But I do think, look, she's made an error. The independent ethics advisor has looked at it and said that although she did do wrong, he didn't think there was any ill intent there. I think someone, though, Chris, and just my final point on this for now, is that I think someone who will look on this and feel a bit not very happy about it is Angela Rayner, because, was what she did particularly worse than it? Well, it probably was slightly bigger in magnitude, but she would also say, she did say that, she took advice and did what she thought was right, which in a sense is what Rachel Reeves' excuse is here. It just makes you wonder, Chris, if Angela Rayner was just more expendable to Keir Starmer.
One thought that I've had is that Rachel Reeves is clearly more in line with Starmer's sort of vision. That we can discern what kind of vision that he has. He's more in line with Starmer's style of politics. She's more in line with Starmer's style of politics than Rayner's, and therefore Rayner is expendable and Rachel Reeves isn't. And yes, so it's not. So Starmer is operating a two-tier approach, even within his own minister. But two-tier care, exactly. But in terms of what you said about we should give ministers a break, they're human beings. Now, I would have sympathy with that, and maybe you do have a point there. And I would have sympathy if it wasn't for the fact that every time the Tory ministers had kind of transgressions, Labour all over it. And they were absolutely relentless, and they were absolutely ruthless in terms of pursuing Tory ministers that found themselves in a bit of trouble, and so they like to dish it out, and if you dish it out, then you've got to be able to take it. So again, it's kind of like this hypocrisy that Labour has, that they they have a go at the other side, and then when it's their turn, oh, it's please understand, and let's be more sympathetic. And so again, utter hypocrisy. So maybe we should have a consistent rule, one way or the other, and everybody sticks to it. But of course, Labour will never stick to it. They will always kind of be ruthless with their opponents. But also Reeves's defence, it falls into the same pattern that Labour seems to make, which is always somebody else's fault. I mentioned the Shaggy defence a couple of weeks ago, and again, this is another "it wasn't me" defence, and she's blaming her husband, partly blaming her husband, which is funny, but ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, remember during the Taylor Swift thing, the Labour ministers were blaming their kids. So it was my kids that made me sort of take the free tickets, and now Rachel Reeves saying it's always my husband's fault. Nice way of treating your own family members. But remember Starmer's defence, like with the China stuff, it's like, well, it's not my responsibility. It's not even the National Security Advisor's responsibility. It's the Deputy National Security Advisor's responsibility. So they have this defence all the time, saying that it's not me, Gov, it's somebody else's responsibility. And actually, what the picture they're painting are of ministers who aren't across the detail. We're told that Starmer and Reeves are details people. That was what their selling points were during, before the election, and now they're telling us that they're not details people. That they delegate very important decisions to other people. So there's a rank hypocrisy here, but it also says a lot about how Labour governs as well, and the fact that these people aren't necessarily across the detail of things as they would like to portray themselves as.
Well, so a couple of things on that. Well, first of all, Keir Starmer is kind of hung by his own petard in the sense that he was the one who famously said a number of times in the Tory years that rule makers can't be rule breakers, and however inadvertently. And however much it may be other people's fault, in inverted commas for those listening, Rachel Reeves didn't get a license that she should have got. I think my argument is that she's obviously got a lot on her plate, and we all of us sometimes, when we're focused on work or whatever it is, may let some things, in our personal lives slide, and we only think after, oh my goodness, I should have done that then. I think we've all done that, and I do think that we need to cut some people some slack on that. But on your early,
I remember this next. If Nigel Farage finds himself in difficulty, I'll remember what you said there, and let's see if you say the same things there, because there are people asking questions about his housing arrangements as well. I just wonder whether you'd be as understanding if it's Farage or anybody else as you are with Rachel Reeves.
Look, again, let's be honest with our viewers and listeners, Chris. I mean, you're probably more likely to be sympathetic with people when it's Tories or Reform. I'm probably more likely to be sympathetic to people when, it's Labour, Lib Dems, Green or whatever. Let's just be honest about that. We all kind of have our side or our team or whatever, and you're just naturally predisposed to be more sympathetic to those people. Let's not try and pretend otherwise. So that's politics. Pays your money, you takes your choice on that one. But I do think with this that it seems that it was an oversight, and everyone should. I do think the matter. I know the Tories are trying to continue it on, but I do kind of think the matter is closed on that. Again, the big thing for Rachel Reeves, and I don't know if you saw her, she wasn't quite crying, but I don't know if you saw her at Prime Minister's Questions this week, sat next to Keir Starmer. I mean, I personally thought she looked kind of ashen-faced. I do feel for her a bit personally, because I think she must be under immense amounts of stress, because I don't know how, for the life of me, Chris, she's going to square the circle of sticking to a rule. Well, she clearly isn't going to stick to her rules, is she? Some of those are going to be broken come next month. But how she and Starmer and the rest of the government then sells that to the public. So I think there's I think there's two big moments for this government over the next number of months. The first is this budget, and the second is the May elections. I think it's looking increasingly doubtful that Starmer is going to get beyond both of those. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's looking very extremely difficult, and Labour have had a terrible week in terms of other policy areas as well. You had the hopefully I get hopefully I'm pronouncing the name right, Hadush Gibatu release. Utter incompetence, utter cock up there. And the fact that he's obviously they caught him, but then he was paid 500 quid to be deported as well. Again, not exactly good headlines for the government. They're having difficulties in terms of the illegal migrants as well. So their latest great idea, really original idea, is to put them in barracks. We haven't heard that one before, have we? I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it? It's extraordinary to see the government having watched the Tories go through this process of let's put them in hotels, let's put them in residential accommodation, let's put them in barracks, and then Rwanda. Labour seem to be going through the same process. And maybe with the Tories, okay, they're the first people who encountered it, but Labour's like, watch the Tories go through this ridiculousness, and they're just repeating it. It's just mind blowing to me. But also you've got the budget difficulties as well, and the fact that both that Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions, wouldn't rule out anything out on income tax. If they did raise income tax, that would be a real big sort of moment. So it's very difficult to see them sort of trying to. It's again, as you say, beyond the May elections.
Absolutely.
Do you think
Yeah.
Reeves will survive into 2026, or do you think she'll go quickly after the budget?
Well, it would be quite something, wouldn't it, if we lost our Prime Minister and our Chancellor? I mean, would that be unprecedented? I don't know. British political history goes back a very long time, but certainly
Reeves, I'm talking about before May. Do you think she'll go before May?
Well, it depends how this budget is seen, how it goes down, and as I say, it's not so much that she needs to keep the confidence of the Prime Minister, although I guess she does. But it's that she needs to keep the confidence of the bond markets. And, we saw what happened with Liz Truss. I mean, markets can absolutely hold Chancellor of the Exchequer's hostage. And so, I would not like to be Rachel Reeves. I just think she has an almost impossible job next month. And I feel like we've been talking about this budget for so blooming long. It'll be a relief to actually get it heard and to know what is being decided. But yeah, I could see a situation whereby, or probably not at the same time, at exactly the same time, but I could absolutely see a situation where the Chancellor goes and then a few months later the Prime Minister goes, which would really be quite something. I can't remember in my time that ever happening. And so, look, I mean, but I also, and I don't know what you think about this, Chris, but I increasingly think that, and I'll explain what I mean when I say this, I increasingly think that we're becoming ungovernable, that in the situation that we have in terms of, social media and 24/7, news and sky high expectations, as well as, I mean, the irony is that people have sky high expectations, but they also don't trust a single politician. And so, you know, I increasingly think that whatever government we had, of whatever political colours, including Reform if they were to get in next time, that people would quickly become disillusioned with them as well, because disillusionment seems to be our constant state of affairs in this country. And I don't quite know what you do to turn that around. I think it's an almost impossible task.
Well, it doesn't help when at the last budget, Reeves and Starmer said, "We've sorted the economy. We've dealt with the Tory mess, and we're not going to do another budget like the one we've just done." And now this budget is shaping up to be even worse than the one last year. So they are contributing to this by setting up the expectations, and now it looks like that they are potentially breaking their election promises on taxes as well. Although you could say that the national insurance rise, they've already broken that already. But I would say is that the reason why the country seems ungovernable is because we've got a sprawling bureaucracy, and we've been pursuing the same ideas, or broadly the same ideas, for the last three decades, which have plainly not worked. And we need something different. The definition of madness is to do the same thing again and again. And what we need is completely new thinking about how we are governed.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you would agree to the extent that, we Liberals are all about, upturning the tables of the establishment. I guess we'd have different policy answers to what you would have. And as it happens, I don't know why I found myself listening to this week, but I try and listen to all sorts of different political things, whether I agree with them or not. And actually, I listened to, I don't know if you get to tune into it, Chris, but the Daily Express now have which I very occasionally write for, I should say. I'm very grateful to do so. But the Daily Express have a political podcast called Daily Espresso. And actually Liz Truss was on this week, so I thought I'd give it a listen to. And, I still think everything that I think about her, that she's very self-unaware, that, she should be a bit more apologetic than she has been, and all the rest of that. I still think that. But she was basically, claiming that actually, the issue in 2022 was that she was never given the chance to put through what she wanted to put through.
I agree.
So, well, I was just going to say that you did sound very Liz Truss-esque there, Chris.
Well, actually, I know people have, their opinions of her, and clearly, obviously it all went wrong in 2022. But if you listen to what she says now, and especially she lays it all down in her book as well, then I challenge anybody to say that she's wrong with regards to the diagnosis about the problems with the British state. So she is worth listening to.
So I just want to ask you then, Chris, in terms of the markets and the bond market, I mean, so, we elect politicians to do a job for us, of whatever political colour. We elect a government, a chancellor is then appointed. We think that they're kind of all powerful in terms of the economy. But aren't we increasingly learning that really they're not, that they are absolutely the servants of the market?
Right. Well, I said this when Liz Truss was deposed, and people like you were saying that I was talking a load of rubbish. So maybe people are sort of coming round to my point of view. I mean, the point that Truss makes, and again, it's not just Truss. David Starkey has been arguing this, for quite a lot as well. Is that power has been transferred? I mean, a lot of it was transferred to Europe. But now we're discovering, now that we have Brexit, that actually a lot of power has been transferred to unelected bodies and to quangos, and we're having, and Parliament is having difficulty kind of asserting itself over those unelected bodies, and part of a lot of the thinking that both the Tories and Reform are doing are in relation to restoring the supremacy of Parliament and removing the power of these unelected bodies. So, like I say, I know people on your side will laugh at anything that Liz Truss says, but listen to what her actual diagnosis is, what her actual prescription of the problem is, and again, I defy anybody to say that she's wrong there.
Look, it's a bit weird, Chris, because I clearly broadly disagree with her on pretty much everything, and yet I found myself weirdly fascinated by this interview I saw this week. I just think I do think it'd help her if she was a bit more if she accepted some blame for what went on in 2022, and she clearly accepts none of it. I don't think that's particularly helpful for her. But she has a point of view, and she's going out there and she's saying that, and it adds to our democracy. So in that sense, I welcome it as much as any other view that is given. Look, as I say, I would not want to be Rachel Reeves. I think she has the most difficult job in government, and that is going to be, any budget is a big day, right? Of course it is, but I think we've been building up to this one for so long that this is really a fundamental day. It's important, obviously, for real people in their lived lives, but politically speaking, it's very important for this government. It's important for this Chancellor. If it goes wrong and the markets especially lose confidence in Rachel Reeves, she will be out on her ear. And as I say, if she goes, Starmer surely has to follow at some point thereafter, because it's as much his policy that she's implementing as hers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think at one point I would have said Starmer has distanced himself from Reeves sufficiently, but now I think, yeah. I mean, given the amount of trouble that the government is in and how much trouble Starmer is in, yeah. Anything that goes wrong with the economy, he'll be out pretty quickly, I suspect. But talking about the establishment and anti-establishment parties and so forth, let's briefly discuss this fascinating new poll from Find Out Now. Now, Find Out Now, you could say, I wouldn't say they necessarily do outliers, but they certainly are at a particular end of the spectrum in comparison with other pollsters, and they do produce some interesting polls, and indeed you could argue that they were one of the first to identify the reform surge, and therefore there's this question as to whether there's now a green surge, and this Find Out Now poll this week puts the Greens in second place behind Reform UK. It puts Reform on 32%, the Greens on 17%, Labour and the Tories on 16%, and the little Lib Dems on 12%. So, what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, but Chris, if you then looked at, they then did the seat extrapolation of that, and even though you say the little Lib Dems on 12%, it still had us as, albeit a very long way behind Reform, but it still had us as the official opposition, as the second biggest Commons party. So, you can say little Lib Dems all you want, but that's in terms of seats. We were coming second to Reform in that, and that would be quite something, wouldn't it, to have the Tories and Labour not as one or t'other of the two biggest parties. So that would be quite something. Look, the Greens are clearly having a moment, aren't they? And say what you like about Zach Polanski, who I know a bit from his time in the Lib Dems, nice guy and all the rest of it, but he is clearly, he's clearly charismatic. He can clearly make an argument. He's been everywhere. Every time I turn on, news or political programming, there he is. And in many respects, I wish there was a Lib Dem person that could gain attraction like that. But I've been saying, actually, I got myself in, well, I still think I was right, but of course I do, but I got myself in a little bit of trouble with some Greens earlier today because I pointed out to them, and they didn't like it at all, the media buzz is fine. Media buzz is great. Clicks is great. Viral videos are great. Membership surges are great. Good on them. But all of that is different to winning actual elections. And when it comes to winning actual elections, I've yet to see, and maybe it's because there just haven't been ones that are predisposed to the Greens, and that is absolutely fair enough. That is an absolutely fair enough point to make. But actually, if you look at the elections this month, October, who has it been most successful for? It's been most successful for the Lib Dems, and that is just a fact. We've gained numerous council seats. We've won them off the Tories, we've won some off Labour, we've won some off the Independents, and last night we won a county council seat in Worcestershire off of Reform. And I think it's really interesting that a Reform seat has now gone to the Lib Dems. And I think we're going to increasingly see this. I think that, and you said to me at the time when the local elections happened, Chris, earlier this year, and I said Reform are going to be dreadful at running these councils. You said, "Oh, Matthew, you're not giving them a chance." Well, I hope that even you might suggest that they've not made, in many cases, the most propitious of starts. I mean, just look at what's happened in Kent. I think they're down 8 councillors from what were first elected. And so, they're just not running councils very well at all. And it's interesting that people, in this case in Worcestershire, and probably obviously quite a lot of reform-esque people have said, well, up with this we will not put, and we're going to elect people that we may not agree with them ideologically, but we think they can run, we think they'll do a better job as a local councillor, and they've elected the Lib Dems. So, I think, it's interesting about my party, isn't it? Because, I come on and very often say, we're not making enough noise, we're not saying enough, we're not being featured enough, and I still think all of that. It doesn't change my mind on that. But, Ed Davey would no doubt say to me, but look at the results, Matthew. In real elections, when people are going to a ballot box, the Lib Dems are winning time and again, and they're winning more and gaining more seats than any other political party in terms of council by-elections. I think both of those things are true. I still think we could be saying more. I still think we could be doing more. But in terms of real elections, where people go out to a ballot box and have to choose, a lot of people are still turning to the Lib Dems. That's just a fact.
Yeah, and I did kind of make that point last week as well, in a rare moment of generosity.
Of truthfulness.
But I was thinking about that. I was just thinking, well, was I too generous last week? The one point that came into my mind is that is there a difference here between local elections and the national picture? So for example, I remember the Lib Dems doing very well in the European elections in 2019, and then they did poorly in the general.
The set of circumstances, though, Chris, wasn't
it? What do you mean? The Lib Dems coming out with an absolutely ridiculous policy on Brexit?
Look, as much as I personally agreed with it, of course, I don't think it was wise of Jo Swinson to have gone with that policy in that election, and of course she lost her own seat. You can't get much more of a kind of damnation than that, or reflection on your policies than that. But actually, I think, I think what this says to me is that we would hold on to pretty much all of our seats if a general election was held, and would actually likely gain some if an election was held tomorrow. Now, would we be way behind Reform on the current figures? Yes, we absolutely would. But just looking at it from a Lib Dem perspective, I don't think we can underestimate how big it would be, how big a seismic shock it. Of course, Reform becoming the government would be a seismic shock, but there'd also be another seismic shock in the Lib Dems if we were to become the official opposition, the second biggest party. It would basically transform British politics. And so, Tim Farron famously says, former Lib Dem leader, former Lib Dem president, he famously says that, people are forever counting us out, and, people are forever predicting that the Lib Dems are going to die. But just like cockroaches, we don't die, and then we come back and are, really very successful. And I think we're having one of those moments at the moment.
You've also, one thing to take into consideration is that you do have the system working for you. And you have consolidated support. You have concentrated support. So the system the first past the post system, that ironically is working for you. Now it becomes a very different question if Labour all of a sudden decides, if Labour is in the same situation in 2028, 29, and they say, right, we're going to go for PR, then it's very different. It would be interesting. Then the Lib Dems will face a choice. Then, won't it? Will it go for self interest, or will it go for principle?
We always support PR. We support PR in principle. We have supported PR for a century, and we still support it now. But at the moment, we have to work within the first past the post system, and sometimes it works for us. Look, at the last general election, absolutely true to say. Although the only difficulty with this is that if it would have been under PR, it would have been a wholly different election in that sense. So people wouldn't necessarily have voted the same way. But if the last time had been a PR election and people voted the same way, then we wouldn't be the third biggest party. Reform would be the third biggest party. So absolutely first past the post worked for us last time. But what can I tell you? We have to fight elections under the voting system that we have. If I can just go back to the Greens for a second. Yeah, I think the big test I think Zach Polanski has passed many tests, there's no doubt about it at all. But he needs to start seeing Green victories in some local elections. As I say, getting likes, getting memes, getting new members, all of that's great. But actually he's there to win elections, and that's going to be the big test.
And also the reaction of people when they find out what his policies actually are, because it's all he's very shiny, new, he's caught up at everyone's on your side, sort of caught up with the euphoria and so forth. But I can't see for example sort of a big chunk of your party going for some of the policies that Polanski is going for, in terms of especially landlords and things like that. So it's like, I mean, kind of. Do you remember Cleggmania? He had this great TV debate. Everyone was excited. Clegg was even leading in some of the polls during that election campaign. And yes, I was in CCHQ at the time. We were absolutely shitting ourselves. That was definitely the case. But then what we started to do is then kind of mounted a campaign saying, well, these are the Lib Dem policies. Would you really want to vote for them? And in the end, what happened was that the Lib Dems actually got fewer seats than they did the last time. So we'll have to see whether, when actually people see what Zach's offering in terms of policy, people will still appeal to them, or whether we're just in a situation now where people are just fed up with the establishment parties that they're prepared to take a risk. And some might say reform is a risk, but some might say, well, we need something radical. Let's go with the Greens.
Well, I think I was replied to when I did my tweets earlier today that the Greens got annoyed with. One Green replied to me and said, "Look, I tactically voted Lib Dem. It must have lived in that ward. I'm assuming I tactically voted Lib Dem to keep reform out." So again, that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because we saw that in Wales last week with the Senedd election. I think increasingly we're going to see progressives, people on the left, whatever you want to call it. To call people, voting for whoever is the most likely candidate to defeat reform. And that's a problem for reform.
That is, but I think we're also going to see that on the right as well. I think, there's lots of people on the right saying we will do anything to kick the Labour government out. And tactical voting is on the table. Whoever's in sort of who's ever the main challenger, then they'll vote for them. So it'll be interesting how that dynamic sort of works. Speaking of the Lib Dems, is Lib Dem sort of section time? So I'll hand over to you, Mathew.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I wrote about this week. So this week on my Substack, Chris, if people want to go and find it, I launched what I thought was the quite imaginatively titled Midweek Mathew, because it came out on a Wednesday. So, I just thought there was good alliteration there. But what I wrote about was a controversy that's certainly a big controversy within the Lib Dems and amongst Lib Dem members this week. And that is that the party released a statement this week that saying that for its internal elections, so, we're a truly democratic party and we're run by a number of committees. And at the moment, those committees are electing the people to sit on those committees. And what it said was basically that, to distill it down very briefly, that after the Supreme Court ruling of earlier this year or whenever it was, that for the purposes of gender quotas on these committees,
trans women would be put down if they stood and were successful, would be put down as men for the purposes of these quotas, and trans men would be put down as women. Now, as you can imagine, in the Liberal Democrats, this caused an absolute outrage, so we're in a situation where people in the Lib Dems, and I think I know you have a different set of thoughts on these things, Chris, but within the Lib Dems have said that up with this we will not put. And as I argued in my piece on Substack this week, even if in the end, because it's the law, this is where the party has to end up at, we should only get there kicking and screaming and shouting our protests. We should not just say, oh, well, this is the law now, so this is what we've got to do, in a kind of feeble, pathetic way that we appear to have done. And I share the outrage of thousands of Lib Dems across the country, and especially LGBT plus Lib Dems and our allies. And the party appears to have thrown its trans and non-binary members and candidates for our federal committees under the bus. And I think that's pretty darn unacceptable. And so there's been lots of statements released by various different internal party groups condemning this. Interestingly, both of our presidential candidates have condemned this. So both Josh Babarinde, who I'm supporting, and Prue Bray as well, have indeed released a joint statement. So they're competing candidates for a position in the party, and they've released a joint statement saying that this is not acceptable and that the party needs to look again. So it's been a big controversy in the Lib Dems, Chris. I don't think this problem is going away for Ed Davey or indeed for our CEO, Mike Dixon. I think they've got to find a way out of this. And I think our view as members is that, as I say, even if this is where we have to end up at, we should do so absolutely protesting it and saying that that we don't agree. We shouldn't just go, well, this is the law now. We have our set of principles, and we either live up to them in terms of situations like this, or I don't quite see why there's any point of us existing, really.
I think you'll know what I think about that. I mean, my approach is don't have quotas, and you won't have any of this these arguments. Just select people on sort of their talents and their abilities. But I know you'll have a different view to me on that one.
Indeed. Absolutely, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And I know you may say it's very kind of in a Westminster or whatever you want to call it, Lib Dem thing. But for us as a party, it's important, and it speaks to what our values are or aren't. So we've had a number. I'm yet to do this, although I will absolutely be doing it. I've just not found time this week. But a number of people have written to the party saying that any information the party has on their gender, for them to no longer hold that. So in which case, if those people win, the party won't have any official documentation about what their gender is, and so they can't, they won't be able to put them down as whatever it is. And so, I think this is creating an administrative headache as much as anything else for the party, and it's absolutely of the party's own making. And so, I really hope that emergency meetings are being held by the head honchos of the party to see about reversing this decision.
I'm sure we'll be discussing this again. We've run out of time, so but I'm sure people will know my views on these issues on quotas and indeed the gender issue. But I won't go into that now because we have run out of time. Mathew, do you want to do your little bit sort at the end just quickly?
Absolutely, and again, we're so delighted to have made it to a year. We're absolutely ecstatic about it, and thanks for all of your support. We really appreciate it. So please, the way you can show that support is by doing all the internety things, by subscribing if you haven't already, and if not, why not? By liking, by telling your friends, by following us on Twitter, X at Political Frenemies. And we've got, genuinely, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we've got some fantastic and lots of new guests as well. So lots of new guests, lots of new perspectives. Make sure you join us.
Yes, thank you. Do like, subscribe, and do all of those things, as Mathew said. That's it for today. And join us next week for another episode of Political Frenemies. Goodbye.